Good morning, good evening. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing, we wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. If you're tuning in on the Life Online Radio Network, we welcome you in. If you're tuning in on our YouTube channel, we welcome you in. A shout out to our sponsor, Affinity WES, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. If you do anything in the writing field whatsoever, for example, the book that was recently published by us, a link will be in the description, they can help. And they're among the best out there. So at Affinity WES. That's on both Twitter and on Facebook. At Affinity WES. And they'll be willing to help you. For today's subject, we kind of have to go on a trip through time. In the 1970s, excuse me, my throat's a little off today, so don't worry, I don't have anything contagious. You're not going to catch anything by listening to me. But I might stumble a little, in which case I apologize. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, it was widely believed that there was a coming global ice age. And indeed, quite a few steps were being taken to prevent it. Of course, being the late 1950s, the first solution that was provided was nuclear bombs, because nuclear bombs cure everything. The idea was if you had enough nukes, you could hold back the oncoming storm, and eventually, hopefully, the fallout and everything would clear and people would be able to live again. We can all imagine how the future would have turned out had they gone with that. The second possibility were what are called deep underground military bases. They're nicknamed DUMBs, deep underground military bases. And quite a few were dug around the United States, Canada, Europe, Russia, etc., from the 1950s even on to the present day. The idea was you could put a few elite survivors down there. Of course, you couldn't take the whole planet, just the people you thought were good. This idea was alternative 2, as compared to alternative 1 with the nukes. And quite frankly, alternative 2 is still ongoing. Its success has yet to be engaged. Alternative 3 was to establish a colony off the planet. Somehow, some way, back then they probably considered the moon, although Mars has become in vogue recently. No matter what, they had 3 alternatives and 3 possible ways to invest the resources that they had. They're already investing money in nukes. My goodness, were they investing money in nukes. Everything from backpack-sized ones up to the Sada Bomba, the 50-megaton nightmare that the Soviet Union dropped. Not holding them responsible for that, there was an arms race at the time. But it's still the biggest atmospheric test of a warhead, and in fact I think still the biggest warhead ever tested, because 50 megatons is just gigantic. Back onto the subject though. The idea of a coming global ice age is really what triggered a lot of panic during those years. If you go back and watch Isaac Asimov, Leonard Nimoy, the documentaries they were doing in the 70s and early 80s, they all kept emphasizing there's another ice age coming. And in fact, their data was correct. There is another ice age coming. We only disagree how far away it is, whether it's 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years. Nobody knows. The cycles of the Earth are too unpredictable. The weatherman still has a difficult job figuring out what it's going to be doing 7 days from now, rain, snow, etc. I'm not bashing weather people in particular because they do have a tough job. It is a lot of data they have to use and a lot of sources they have to take into account. The butterfly effect, the notion that a butterfly flapping its wings can cause a tropical storm in China, still does hold true to a certain degree. But as far as an ice age goes, we really don't appreciate how catastrophic an ice age would be. The previous ice ages that we had covered North America to quite some distance, Europe to quite some distance, yet let Siberia free. The South Pole, they're still trying to determine how far it went out because there's a lot more ocean in the southern hemisphere than there is land. So finding evidence is very difficult over an ocean. What you have to look at when you're looking at Arctic survival documentaries, whether they're at the North Pole or the South Pole, is the fact that we really only see life at the edges. They complain polar bears have difficulty because of the retreating waters, but at the same token, where there's no polar bears, where there's no seals, where there's no water, where there's nowhere these people can breathe and eat, these creatures can breathe or eat, there's no life. If you go right to the north the geocentric Earth North Pole, there's nothing around for hundreds, if not thousands of miles. That's because there's no real biological activity. Polar bears, as well adapted as they are to survive up there, they won't find a seal breathing hole for thousands of miles. They won't find mice for thousands of miles. They won't find wolves for thousands of miles. There's nothing for them to eat. Same with seals. They can't poke through a mile of ice, however thick it might be in their location, so they're not going there. Now, there are fish. There's fish underneath the surface. But as far as the actual pole itself goes, there's no life there. And this is true, like I said, right down to wherever the borderline descends to. So, for example, let's pretend on a new ice age, Hudson Bay becomes the new border of where the ice gets to. So around the edges of Hudson's Bay, we would see polar bears, seals, all the things you usually think of with nature documentaries being up north. But in the middle of Hudson Bay, there wouldn't be too much surviving. And worse, when that ice age ended, or when it had a temporary thaw, millions of gallons of water would come rushing down whatever new pathways it could find, whichever areas it had melted the first. This is partially what explains the great extinctions of the end of the last ice age. When the last thawing period happened about 15,000 years ago, animals were not equipped to adapt. They were used to living on the borderline between the taiga, which is mixed forest and hills, and the tundra, which is the Arctic area. They had adapted to this before, but they had new and different pressures. They believe that there was a volcano going off at the same time. There may have been a meteor impact. They haven't really decided whether that's possible or not, but scientists think it was a whole bunch of things, including the presence of man, that pushed those species to extinction. The woolly mammoth, the woolly rhinoceros, the great sloth, lots of animals that are being that humans are being blamed for exterminating were facing multiple pressures. A dwarf form of the woolly mammoth actually managed to survive on an island right up until the age where the pyramids were being built. So we can see humans were not the sole catalyst behind their extinction. Did we help? No. But the same token, the environment gave a lot of help. The reason I bring up extinctions and ice ages and climate change is because in the present day, we're still going through it. You have the United Nations, you have the World Wildlife Federation, who are all championing the cause of animals. And don't get me wrong, I think it is very important that we protect every single area of the earth, every single species, and try to keep it going. But the statistics we are getting are really unfair to ourselves. In my opinion, humans are smart. We will choose to do things the right way, if we are given the opportunity. Lots of the organisms they record going extinct are really, really niche insects and mammals and birds that only live in one specific area. And I mean like an area sized less than a city. Like we're talking one peninsula, and they have one mutation that separates them from every other bird or insect out there. So when these animals that are so severely specialized die off because something changed in their environment, sometimes it is humans. It can't be denied that we are responsible for some extinctions, but not all of them. The same token, you are being held responsible for the death of every creature. It's anthropomorphic extinction. Well, probably not. A lot of people don't like it when I say this, but the truth is, when the dinosaurs were around, the amount of carbon in the air was 3 times higher than it was at present. I think the dinosaurs had a little bit more successful of a run than we did. Even though we lived 75 million years after they went extinct, their remains are everywhere. These are gigantic creatures that survived for millions and millions of years, whereas humanity in its present state is no more than 250,000 years old. So right now, the dinosaurs are winning, and they had a much different climate that benefited from the extra carbon dioxide. This brings us back to the idea of extinction. The powers that be, the Illuminati, the people you don't like to be in your life, are still convinced of this idea of extinction. And that's why they like to work it into everything they do. Turn on your TV, and you're going to see an advertisement from the World Wildlife Fund showing the panda, which, by the way, has been taken off the endangered species list. Go look it up. The panda is no longer considered endangered. But they don't want to lose their cute and cuddly mascot, because that's what convinces you to be on their side. Show you something cuddly saying, oh, look how endangered it is. And it's not. But by showing you that and evoking that attitude in you, and the next commercial in will be for Walmart, selling goods made in China or Vietnam or somewhere in a less privileged area where the rights are nowhere close to what we enjoy in North America, thanks to the Constitution and our Charter. And you're being told, save, save, save. Well, humans want to help the wildlife, but they also need to save a buck. And the fact that over the past 30 years, our incomes have been throttled is driving us towards having to make the selfish choice and buy the cheap stuff at the Walmarts, at the Targets, I shouldn't pick on Walmart, I apologize, I do pick on them a lot, but Walmart, Target, Best Buy, all these places, they're just saying, cheap stuff, come to us. And that's their entire sales pitch. They don't tell you this computer was made in California by a bunch of people that are making a good income and in return are supporting the economy. No, they just tell you this computer is $200. Come on and get it. So once you finish watching that, you go back on the news, you hear about the pandemic. See, they love to ratchet that panic button. You got a pandemic. We got a world that's going to hell. We have cheap goods. Everybody buy them as quick as you can, especially toilet paper, which is apparently back in vogue to buy. I hope my listeners out there are well stocked, but at the same token aren't going out crazy buying supplies again. There will be enough stuff for anybody. The transportation industry already took the hit. I was there when it happened, and they're going to keep supplying everybody. Food, water, all the comforts of home will be available, provided you have them already. For the poor people in Flint, Michigan, I do hope they get the water satisfactory very soon. We're getting distracted, though. Once again, when extinction is on the line, most people consider it if you give them a choice between two products of equal value, so let's say a packet of chips, something every one of us have eaten, and you show them a 99-cent box of chips that are made with all the big agro-businesses and sprayed with pesticides, etc., and you show them a 99-cent organic bit of potato chips, same size bag, same size everything, most people are going to buy the organic potato chips because they do have a conscience. However, in the real world, you get the 99-cent junk food potato chips, and believe me, they're both junk food, versus the $3 organic potato chips, because just by putting the word organic on it, they get to charge you a premium. Your guilt equals their opportunity. Because you're thinking, oh, if I buy organic, I'm saving the environment, I'm helping people, I'm generating jobs, I'm keeping the livestock free. Yes and no, organic can be mislabeling, but the point is, most people will choose, provided the price range is the same. Because we're all on a tight budget. It's 2020. For anybody out there who's listening that are rich, congratulations, you've won the game of life, and you deserve all the credit in the world. We're going to get back to you guys in a minute. For everybody else, try to get your fruits, your vegetables. Don't forget, you need more than just meat to survive. You can't eat out every day out at Taco Bell. Sorry to tell you, you have to eat your veggies. Your mother was right. Once I step off my pedestal, however, let's start talking about some rich people. If you recall, I mentioned that there are three possibilities. Alternative one was nukes. We know why it's a stupid idea. I'm not even going to address it. Alternative two, with the deep underground military bunkers. The rumors around these things are phenomenal. I mean, supposedly, the Denver International Airport in Colorado is one entrance to a massive deep underground bunker that supposedly has a whole city down there. There's supposedly a mass transit train that goes from Los Angeles to New York. And I find this one tough to believe. It is possible, but I just don't think it could be kept that secret. The amount of earth you would have to move to build an underground train of any kind to go across a continent would be astonishing. Look at the Channel Tunnel that was only dug out, 20 years ago? How much earth did they come up with that when they dug that out? And it's a phenomenal amount of earth. There was no way they could keep it secret. So the idea that you'd have this cross-continent, gigantic railway going into place is frankly a touch ludicrous. That being said, that doesn't mean they couldn't have... that doesn't mean they couldn't go underground and then bring everything up after they think the disaster has gone. This is technology that is known to us. The Norwegians, the smaller countries in Europe, do actually build military launch facilities, including aircraft, into the sides of mountains. And it's just exactly like what you'd see on G.I. Joe, where the side of the mountain would open up and then airplanes would come rushing out. That's their continuation of government plan exposed to the world. See how easy it is for these plans to be exposed if you just keep your eyes open? Continuation of government basically means they want to be able to continue to govern even when the earth is reduced to an ash. I think Ronald Reagan said, so long as the last person on earth is American, then we've won the war. And that's close to a direct quote, if not a direct quote. We're going to turn away from the 1970s and bring it up to the present day, though. Although, we're still going to stay in the 70s for a little bit, because in 1971, Elon Musk was born. Elon Musk was born to a Canadian mother and a South African father. And as you're aware, well, as most people are aware, he's become rich enough that he has his own spacefaring agency, he has his own car agency, he has all sorts of things. Elon was a very interesting character. He grew up basically about the same time as I did, and he was programming on the Commodore 64, and he sold a game that he was working on at the age of 12 for about $500. His family life, however, wasn't quite so good. It shows he has a very good mind, but his family life wasn't very good. His mother and father separated, and he decided to live with his father. For regrettable reasons, it didn't work out, and he no longer speaks to his father. There's some serious daddy issues there. He calls him a terrible human being. Almost everything you could possibly think of, he has done. That's a direct quote. So we can see he's already got daddy issues. Not saying that most of us don't, but there's serious ones there. Most of us still speak to our parents in one form or another, especially one we chose to live with during the formative years of our life. He graduated high school in Pretoria, I think it is. It's the capital of South Africa. And while he was down there, apartheid was in full effect. Whites and blacks could not drink out of the same drinking fountains. Again, this is in the 70s and the 1980s. They weren't allowed to intermarry. They weren't allowed to do anything together. The whites lived their lives one way, and the blacks lived their lives another way. Apartheid quite literally means skins apart. Whether you like him or not, this is just the way that he was raised that I am documenting. Difficult relationship with his father and half-sister, although he does seem to have gotten along with his brother, and growing up in what was honestly one of the most repressive dictatorships of the time. The South African dictatorship was so repressive that in 1989, when they knew they had to have hand power over, they disassembled all their nuclear warheads and got rid of them all because they didn't trust Nelson Mandela and his people with nuclear weapons. Talk about an ultimate racist racial insult. We're good enough to have nukes, you're not. India and Pakistan can have them, Israel can have them, about a dozen other nations that aren't supposed to have them, but we can't have black people have them. Are you nuts? It was the 1980s, things were different, but at the same token, we were more enlightened than the 1960s. That attitude is just condescending as anything. So Elon Musk grows up in this environment where black people and white people are different, and his father is the most evil person in the world. What kind of evil must his father have done to warrant that in a place like South Africa? He decided he wanted to go to university in the United States, but he realized it's tough to immigrate straight to the United States, which is true. There are not only quotas on applications to immigrate, but they also look at where you're coming from. So, for example, somebody from the Philippines, I don't know why I'm picking the Philippines, I just am, it would be easier for them to get into Canada, the United States, from Saudi Arabia than it would be from the Philippines. And I'm not making that up. That is a real world example. And I've seen people dragged away that are fully functioning members of society, have family here, that have kids in university here, and they tell them, you're on the boat, you're going back. Why? Because we didn't like something in your paperwork. But if they had come from Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, somewhere like that, they would have been okay. Policy makes no sense, and it makes less sense when you look into it. But I welcome everybody to do it. Learning about people and learning about policy is essential to understanding the problems in the world. Since South Africa, at that point, was, well, to be honest, they were embargoed by everybody. Nobody would let a South African into anywhere. They couldn't trade. They couldn't do anything. But remember, Elon's mother Elon's mother was half Canadian. So because of that, he was able to apply to Queen's University in Canada. And he got a citizenship through Canada. So he found a way around the system. Smart man. Because to go from Canada to the United States is way easier than it is to go from South Africa to the United States, especially when there's a complete embargo on your people. He found a way around it. Now, he studied at the University of Pennsylvania. Yes, University of Pennsylvania has come up before during my shows. Another of its alumni is the current President of the United States, Mr. Trump. And that's when Elon Musk decided to go through business. He's got a BS and a BA, which is a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts. And he started to make money on the one thing he knew. Remember he published that program and made $500 out of it? He started to develop .com websites during the very first .com bubble. Now, where Musk really shows his brilliance, his genius, is the fact that he knew he was a master at selling out at the right time. Big companies would come to him and say, "We are interested in your product." He'd sell right as soon as they got there at a pretty decent price. He was one of the people that helped develop PayPal. He did not directly develop it, but he was on the team that put the finishing touches on it, which was bought out by eBay for billions. That's billions with a B. So needless to say, he's been playing with money for quite some time. His father was an engineer, so he's got a good, solid head on his shoulders. The question is, what's really going on in his mind? Over the past few years, we all know Elon Musk has formed SpaceX. I'm not going to pay attention to Tesla or any of his other companies at the moment because they don't really contribute very much to the narrative. There's a couple scandals, there's a couple of crazy things that went on, but SpaceX really is the gateway to where this episode is headed. Elon Musk decided that for the future of humanity, we had to spread out and become a multi-planetary species. This is a laudable goal. He has good intentions there. And he started working with the Russians because after 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they had a ton of boosters and they had a ton of rockets lying around that they wanted business for. I think Pepsi or Coca-Cola was one of the first to have their logo on the side of a Russian rocket. They still had to do science. They still had to maintain their space station Mir. They had to rescue their astronaut on Mir, who was unfortunately left behind while the Soviet Union collapsed and the Russian Federation was formed. So remember, here's Elon Musk in around 2000 waving his money saying he wants to buy former ICBMs, and they didn't take him seriously because at that point, billionaires just weren't in the business of going into space. Fast forward to the Anasari X Prize. And SpaceX and Elon Musk were very much in the running to win it. It was only Composite Technologies, I think it is, who won the prize because their ship was ready a week before Elon Musk's was. And keep in mind, Scaled Composite, that's the company I'm thinking of. Keep in mind, Scaled Composites and SpaceX both started from the ground. Scaled Composites, I think, had a slightly bettered idea for an orbital launch, but Elon Musk was building to launch to Mars. Scaled Composites has also had an accident with their spaceships and is still in the process of recovering, while Elon Musk has had success after success after success. In all this, I give him praise. He's had a very steady hand. He didn't try to rush a launch schedule just so he could win a prize. It was a $1 million prize. Now, Burt Rutan and Elon Musk, $1 million in their pocket is like me giving you a penny. And even though pennies no longer exist, we'll say a nickel. You're not even going to think about it in your pocket. So he willingly lost the X Prize, but he did get himself appointed to the board of directors for the next X Prize. The next X Prize is to land on the moon. Something not quite so easy, as Israel and India both found out last year. They both tried to land probes, and the moon is a little bit of a tricky target. People always try to point out that the space program in the 1960s and early 70s was fake because of how difficult it was to go to the moon, but that just shows how ingenious people can be. If we want to do something, we can do it. And we've been steered away from it for so long, we become very poor at it. So we have to rebuild our technology from the ground up. This is my worry in the event of a future ice age, it would be hard to develop the same technology. All the resources would wind up being buried deep. The oil is no longer on the surface bubbling up. You can't get copper off the surface. You have to go mining. To go mining, you have to know where the stuff is. You have to know where to pump the oil out of. You have to be able to maintain the machines. So basically, we'd have to find a new way to get off the planet to run our cars. And whether that be electrolysis, we'd have to generate electricity. You see, everything that we'd run up against, we have that difficulty. Base technology we know about physically, but not many of us can build a car from scratch. Not many of us can build a battery from scratch. So that would be a major risk should we lose everything. Again, alternative 3, exactly what Elon Musk is aiming for. Elon Musk stated before that he has no intention of dying on Earth. He's also stated that he intends to go to Mars. He has 7 children. He hasn't really mentioned much about which of his children he intends to go to Mars and which he doesn't. But I can assure you he has a plan. It's just difficult to know precisely what that plan is. So if we decide to look into SpaceX, that really opens our parallels to alternative 3. He's currently developing the Starship rocket. A little bit of a grand term, but at the same token, when you bring out a new product, you want to give it a sexy name. You want to give it something that's going to sell. Again, if you put the right label on something, people will buy it. SpaceX has been working their way up through baby steps, which is the proper way to do anything, especially when you're working with space. They had a lot of publicized successes and failures. They would usually succeed in getting the payload into space, but they're trying to do some crazy stuff, like land the returning boosters on a floating platform at sea. I've always found this very curious. If you are going to try to land on a platform, why wouldn't you do what the United States Air Force does and land on a salt flat like at Area 51, or just somewhere like the Soviets do, where they land in Siberia? You make sure that your astronauts have some guns to take care of a wolf or anything that might threaten them, and you just track them down afterwards. Elon Musk went an entirely different road. He decided to land everything in the sea. That's pretty gutsy and something that's never been attempted before. Landing capsules from space in the sea is common enough, but landing everything nicely on platforms ready to be stocked up and reloaded, ready to go again, that is new. And for the next set of spacecraft that he has, it's designed basically Mars or bust. If you have the chance, Google the image for SpaceX's Starship, and it's a big 1950s looking thing. Literally looks like it was pulled out of Space Ghost, not the Coast to Coast, the original Space Ghost from the 1960s. The cartoons we grew up with as kids. It's got big fins, it's bright, shiny metal, and it's got a cockpit in it. Compared to his Dragon capsule, it's a hot rod in comparison. The Dragon is already a marvel of technology with touchscreens, 7 seats, beautiful reclining seats that are probably more comfortable than any of us has in their car. And the Dragon spacecraft really is phenomenal. But the Starship, which they've blown up one, partially on purpose because they were doing pressurization tests. The second one damaged itself, which again, they're testing it. They're trying to make sure this thing is ready to go from launch 1. You might ask why. Well, that would be a good question. Because Alternative 3 never went away. They know the deep underground military bases are ultimately a last-ditch effort against any sort of civilization-threatening event. NASA has been throttled for funds since the 1970s, especially when compared to the military. That's why the space shuttle was so valuable for so long, is because they didn't have the money to retire it. They could keep it running, but they had to retire the space shuttle to keep the space station going. And now Elon Musk has come along to fill in that void. The Orion capsule, made by Boeing, is still sputtering on the ground, while SpaceX has already made both crewed trips and supply trips to the International Space Station. SpaceX has showed their technology works. And that's why they're making sure the Starship works. Because when they send this thing to the moon, to Mars, whatever it might be, they know they only get one shot. Unfortunately, the human species is very paranoid and reactive. We're all brave when we go out exploring, but when things go missing, we shut down, we go into investigation mode. For further reference, look what happened with the Soyuz disaster, look what happened with the Apollo 1 disaster, and look at what happened to the 2 space shuttles. They each shut down their programs for a couple years before they launched another one. Elon Musk is making sure first shot, first success, because there's no other way he can continue to go forward. He is staking a life's work on being able to go to Mars. Now, at first I brought up the Alternative 3 option, where he's providing a means where the rich, the great, and the good, as was defined as the wealthy and the powerful, will be able to flee this rock if they choose to. In recent interviews, Elon Musk has come up with a couple of very interesting observations. Just a few days ago, he released an image of what he called an interplanetary gas station. And this thing is basically somewhere where a spacecraft could land and refuel. Mars's gravity is about 1/3 that of Earth's, so it's easier for a spaceship to land and take off, especially if you're going to do it repeated times. And if you can do it with less fuel in the tank, that's more room for cargo, people, or just a better option for safety. He can take the carbon that's already in Mars's atmosphere, the water that we've recently discovered is there, do some electrolysis, produce methane and oxygen, which makes a beautiful fuel for rockets. Do you happen to know what the Starship runs off of? Water and methane. Exactly the fuels that he is going to be producing on Mars using materials that are there. So instead of the NASA proposal, where they would send 2 spaceships, one to go there and one to come back, he's going to be able to have his own fuel ready to go and ready to sell to you if you happen to pop by. How is he going to take payment? Why, PayPal, of course, the various platform he developed. Or he'll come up with another one for Spacebucks or whatever his idea is. But we know he's going to do this because just yesterday, the 28th, which was Wednesday, Elon Musk was quoted as saying he has no intention of following any laws in space. You heard me right. He has no intention of following any laws in space. He points to the Treaty on Outer Space Exploration, which says space is free for all. Which is true. Space is free for everybody to explore. But we also need to remember that we're sending human beings into outer space. And once Elon Musk is in orbit, he no longer needs to worry about what rights he might have, what privileges he might have. If you're on his spacecraft, you're on his ride, you follow his rules, whatever they might be. This is where things start to get a little bit scary. Like I said, he can set whatever rules he likes, and there's nothing Earth can do about it. The United Nations could come together, but they would still have that treaty that says anything in space is off limits from any country. So Elon Musk can go up there, set up a colony, and run it any way he wants. Remember, this is a boy who was traumatized by his father and grew up in the apartheid era. So when he's selecting crews, you really have to wonder what his criteria are. I'm sure he'll include a couple people as token representatives, but I think we all know who he's going to lead towards when it comes to selecting his crews. There's also a very interesting historical precedent for this. In the 1500s, right up till the 1900s, people wanted to get settlers to the New World. Well, to the new worlds, the new islands they were finding, North America, South America. The kings and queens and everybody wanted their population to go over there because it was crowded at home, and it was perceived there was unlimited room in the New World. But a ticket to the New World from the Old World was very expensive. Just like a ticket to Mars is going to be expensive, whether you're one of Elon Musk's employees or not. It's still going to cost you a significant amount of money. So what they did in the olden days is they would say, okay, we're going to let you go on this ship and take you to the New World, and in return, you're going to sign this term of indentured servitude. This means you have to work off your debt, and you are legally bound to do it. Elon Musk has said several times he's a social liberal but fiscal conservative. And it only makes sense if you're going to be sending people to Mars that they work off their debt. I wouldn't have a problem with this. It's earn your keep. If you're going to Mars, you're going to need to earn your keep one way or another. But since he says he doesn't plan to follow any laws, this is where I start to get worried. You can't work people 24 hours a day. We know this, but throughout history, there have been tons of examples of them not following this law. There's no set term for how long indentured servitude can be. So, I mean, if you're 20 years old, you feel adventurous, you sign up with Elon Musk's SpaceX, I want to go to Mars. So what does that mean? Do you wind up working till you're 50 as a garbage man, and then you can finally start marrying and having children? How exactly would this term work out? And while we're speculating on it, I'm pretty sure Elon Musk has already figured this out. It's in his head. And for him to come out and say, I'm free, I get to do what I want in space, there's no nation's law that can stop me, that's very concerning to me. Just sheerly from a humanitarian point of view. He's a billionaire already. The only thing he can achieve is becoming the first billionaire on Mars as a permanent residence. And he's got that within his grasp. He has to grow a colony there, which there's other places that produce all sorts of things that he can take up there, and he can pull all that out of his pocket. But to get people there, not everybody can afford that round trip. So I can see a kind of indentured servitude coming back into place. And while Elon Musk may have good intentions, may have bad intentions, I've compared him to the James Bond villain from Moonraker before. His intentions are to be off the planet when something happens. But no matter what his intentions are, his overseers, his taskmasters, whoever he appoints to be in charge of the work crews and that are running these indentured servants and doing whatever needs to be done, they might not be so inclined. Elon Musk is a businessman. He's gotten where he is through hard work, and ultimately businessmen look at charts. Most of you work for relatively big companies, and if you don't, if you do know the owner, you know they see a different picture than you do. There's a difference between revenue and profit. Revenue is what you have coming in, profit is what you have going out. And the step between revenue and profit is a very complicated one. People like the current president of the United States, Elon Musk, big businessmen like Bert Rutan, they are more interested in the two numbers, and then they'll dig in if they see something that doesn't make sense. That's why they have accounting departments. That's why they have lawyers working for them. They have so much going for them, they don't need to get into the details unless it's really bad. So, like I said, Elon Musk will be there in whatever the bridal suite is, whatever the most luxurious mansion there is possible on Mars, probably complete with a pool, sauna, and water jet, while everybody else is fighting for 15-second showers that cost $1 each. Well, actually, no, the Earth equivalent would be a 5-minute shower for $10. And I take that number not out of thin air, but for anybody who's listening who happens to be a trucker, you know what I'm talking about. You're going through town, it's the middle of the night, you need to shut down and go to sleep, but you also need to shower. And you have to use the communal showers, and it's about $10 for about 5 minutes worth of a shower. Keeps you clean, keeps you regular, gives you the chance to do what you need to do. But on Mars, you might have to do that every time. It's not like here on Earth where you have a water bill where it says you owe $30 a month. Again, I'm making that figure up, and you got to pay it. On Mars, water is naturally going to be more expensive, even though it will be a byproduct of his fuel system. I don't know how much of that electrolysis product will be devoted to making water for the people as opposed to making fuel for starships. Especially assuming that Russia, China, and the United States get in on the game, they're going to realize that it's cheaper to buy fuel up there than to carry it up with them. Elon Musk is doing an old business tactic, being first on the block. It gives you an advantage if you're the first on the block because you get name recognition. People say, oh yeah, we're going to use SpaceX's facility because we know they'll be there. We know they're not going out of business. It's like McDonald's. Everybody knows McDonald's. It's not the best in the world. At the same token, you know wherever you go, you're going to get the same hamburger and french fries, and it's going to keep your stomach from grumbling. Unless you're me, in which case I find it revolting. But, again, McDonald's is not the worst place in the world. Because they will have that advantage, SpaceX will be able to pretty much control any information coming out of Mars. There's going to be an internet on Mars, which is why he's installing the free internet on Earth, just to make sure that everybody there is connected into their surveillance. And Mars will be the ultimate surveillance state. On Earth, we have nothing like it. It'll be justified, of course, to say this is for the colonists and protection. This will be so we can keep track of them. They'll probably all have something like a Fitbit on them, which is actually a good idea when you think about it, because to monitor heart rate, etc., emergencies happen everywhere. Any one of us, God forbid, can be walking down the street and something can happen. You can fall asleep, things can happen. So all of these technologies will be put in place with the intention of helping the colonists. But also, they'll be there to help Elon Musk, his business, and I'm pretty sure there'll be live streams of things for on Earth. This pandemic would have been a perfect example. Lots of people would have sat around watching what happens on Mars, because it would be more interesting watching those people go outside than watching us not go outside. And they'll have festivals, I'm sure. Whatever first day will become Mars Day. And since Elon Musk is not beholden to any government on Earth, quite likely he plans to create his own government on Mars. This creates a very interesting problem for the United Nations. Right now, there's already about 30, 40 nations that are trying to be recognized by the United Nations and to gain a seat there. So, what exactly is the requirement to form your own government? Elon Musk is basically buying himself his own country. A place where he makes the rules, he decides who comes, who goes, and he decides who gets what privileges. That is potentially scary. I'm going to give Elon Musk the benefit of the doubt and say he has good intentions, but we're the same age. I know I don't have forever left, and whoever takes over from him, there's a lot of situations where taking over for somebody else has turned out to a bad idea. I'm just going to compare Lenin and Stalin. When Lenin got ill, Stalin took over. Lenin was no saint, but Stalin was Lenin 10 times worse. I'm hoping Elon Musk has good intentions in his heart, and he's got this enough sense to know that whoever his second in charge is will also be as well intentioned. Otherwise, Mars is going to turn into the North Korea of space. Only good information comes out, limited internet going in, and nobody can escape. Can you imagine how hard it would be to escape if you got there as an indentured servant and they're whipping you and torturing you and all sorts of crazy stuff? It would be horrible. You can't just jump a fence. You've got to stow away on a rocket, and there's not that much space to hide on a rocket ship that's going to be going for 3 months at a time. Although it probably would be an interesting comparison to Among Us, which is a video game where there is an imposter. Perhaps that's what inspired it. So climate change has caused Elon Musk to look to Mars to establish his own country. Hopefully, he's a benevolent dictator. We wish to thank you for joining the Silverlight Show this week. Once again, thanks to our sponsor, Affinity WES, Affinity Writing and Editing Services. If you have any questions or queries, anything like that, please feel free to email us at silverlightservices@gmail.com. And most importantly, there'll be a link in the description for my new book, Frogs, which is a horror story set in Canada. Don't worry, I'm not big into gore. We thank you all for listening. We thank you for your time. And most importantly, we thank you for your mind.